mind just a brief introduction of yourself, your history in construction, your level of experience in building surveying?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. I started architecture way back when, and after doing that for a couple of years, I decided to, the bachelor course, I moved to construction management and economics, which is, I think, what you are all doing as well.
Yeah. So you started at Uni SA?
Yeah, so that was at Uni SA.
Right.
Yeah. At completion, I was doing my thesis, similar to what you're doing now, and I was lucky enough to have Peter Green as the person that I was not really interviewing, actually. He was helping, he was assisting throughout, and it was to do with auditing of private certifiers. So he was a private certifier working at TCon. Following that, he asked if I wanted to join. I didn't really know what building surveying was at the time. So I did, and I stayed with TCon for about on and off 5 or 6 years, I think it was. I went to Charles Sturt Council for a year, and then from there to Davis Langdon, which was project managers, cost consultants, and building surveyors as well. They got bought out by ACOM, and then following that, they looked at disbanding some of the things that they purchased, which was project management, cost consulting, and building surveying. Pretty much what they purchased, they got rid of. So that was 7 years ago. And then Stan Fuller and myself, Stan is retired late last year. We decided to start the company 7 years ago. And focus mainly on commercial work as well.
So you're a level 1 building surveyor?
Level 1 building surveyor,
And a private certifier at that, yeah?
That's right.
I think now we'll jump into the individual codes. So everyone will just take you through an individual code, just a few questions on that.
Sure.
And what is the access and egress part first? Are you satisfied with the existing NCC provisions for the design of access and egress? And if not, why not?
Okay. All right. It's an interesting question. Whether it's difficult as a private certifier and even a council building surveyor to familiarise yourself with every different provision that there is in the building code, and then from there to make a determination as to whether you're satisfied or not satisfied with it. I think that should be undertaken by someone separate to myself, not a building surveyor. You have different groups involved, and they will determine whether something meets a certain criteria or not. But our role, I find, as a private certifier, is not really to be satisfied with legislation, but to enforce it. So in regards to the question, we could look at it as, am I satisfied personally with it? That's probably a different take. But in my role as a private certifier and what we do day to day, it doesn't really concern me. What concerns me is just enforcing the requirements. So I think in regards to access and egress, if we're looking at access as in access for people with disabilities, I think there's room for improvement there. We do have access into buildings and all areas, which is fine, but we don't have egress, so escape for people with disabilities. That's a problem, especially because we're moving more towards high-rise apartments as well, where people are living. And it does become extremely difficult for the fire service, who are the only means or only way possible for people with disabilities to escape, particularly wheelchair users when I say that. So that's one thing that I think needs to be addressed, and kind of has, because you can put lifts in now, which are fire rated and they can be used for egress, but hasn't really been, it's not a mandatory thing that you need to do.
Okay, and as you said, and the NCC provisions for emergency egress do not cover the disabled people, and how do you think this will be dealt in the future?
It's very simple for a single-storey building, or actually, it's simple for single-storey buildings. In fact, it probably is, arguably, it's already in for an existing, for single-storey. because if you do have an accessible entry, you should also have, by rights, an accessible exit as well. How should it be dealt with in the future? So I think the question is probably more in relation to where you do have lifts, because lifts can't be used in a fire, and how do you escape? It has been slightly addressed, like I was saying, with the requirements now that lifts are within, that you can construct them within a fire-rated shaft. So it is protected from fire and smoke, and it does allow you to egress out from the building in a fire situation, so you can use that lift. There probably just needs to be, it's like most things that are new, and because we have insurances and because there's risk involved, if you're the first one to jump and provide those things, where does the risk lie if it doesn't work, if you're not maintaining it? So I think all that needs to be resolved. So firstly, someone needs to say, yes, I want to do this. Secondly, how's it being maintained? And that needs to be a very strict, I don't know, probably even more so with apartments, because the maintenance is shared by a strata group. But that needs to be quite strict in regards to just ensuring that those things do remain in place, because it's the only way that someone believes that they need to get to that point to be able to egress safely. If that doesn't work, well, there's going to be some lawsuits here and there. So, so I think there's still there is a push towards it. You can see it even with the Australian Building Codes Board. They are pushing towards disabled egress, but they just need to take the mandatory step, and that's the next step. Is not just put it out as a guide. It needs to be mandated.
Sure. Okay. Other than this, how do you think the NCC access and egress provisions might develop in the future?
I think it's probably going to move a lot more towards computer modelling. At the moment, it's not utilised that much. Probably doesn't need to be. But I think as we try and push further, and there's new ways of construction, and there's innovation and technology. I think what's going to come with that is a lot more use of computer modelling. So if there is a fire, how do people egress the building? So that's something I can see. Well, it's already in now, but I think it's not really used that often. But that's something that's going to be developed a lot more, I think. When you say access, what do you mean by access? Do you mean just entries at the entry into buildings, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's. I don't think there's nothing that we can really do about that at the moment. There's not a lot coming through in regards to what you can see in technology wise. We do have lifts, and that's a pretty good technology. You can't. It does develop obviously, but. Getting that vertical transportation in the building, that's important. I suppose that might be down the track faster lifts, especially for egress. But that's probably all I can really say about the question.
And are the fire rated lifts used often or not really? Are they?
There's not one. So
Okay.
that's what I mean. If it's not if something's not mandated, the building code works to minimum requirements. Okay. So what that means is that, say after a certain threshold, you might be required to do something. If it's not required, the person who is going to be paying for the development, and it could be, just say it was any of us, we would be thinking the same thing. If I don't have to do it, why do it? Why spend the money? Maybe a little bit naive about the reasons for it, a little bit ignorant, but that's fine. But in regards to mandating something, it just changes it completely, because now, potentially over a certain limit, that you have to budget in for the fact that you're going to be providing this lift. And we're not talking about a fire-rated lift as in, the car itself. It's actually providing a lobby. So similar to when you come out of the lifts here, it's open. We're open to the corridors here, which is not a good thing, because fire and smoke can spread. What they're talking about is an enclosure, a fire-rated enclosure that continues, and it's quite large and continues all the way up. It needs to be pressurised to keep smoke out, and then the lift car is within that shaft, within this larger area.
All right.
Yeah, so it's not simple. It takes up a lot of space. Real estate is very important when it comes to decisions as to whether you're actually going to build apartments. So to take up such a large volume all the way up the building, it's not financially viable. And that's what's going to happen when maybe costs come down. Maybe they can then start to introduce these things.
Okay.
Okay, next thing for the energy efficiency part. Given the increasing reliance on renewable energy, do you think the NCC energy efficiency positions are fair in every state, especially in South Australia and Tasmania? Because the compared with Sydney and Melbourne, South Australia have more energy efficiency.
Again, this would only be my personal opinion.
Yeah.
It's not what I think about when I'm when I'm here. Right, given the increase, do you think it's fair in every state? Do I think it's fair? All right, so if we're looking at whether something's fair, it's fair. We'll have to be looking at the person who's spending the money to potentially put double glazing in or to meet a certain criteria. So is it fair for someone who doesn't have a lot of money, who wants to build, and they have to spend another $10,000, for example, to put in rainwater tanks, double glazing, and to do all these things to meet the energy efficiency requirements? Because of the benefits, I think that come from, and I'm not talking about renewable energy, I just mean the benefits that come out of not having to turn the air conditioner on because you've orientated a dwelling in the right spot, you've put the windows in the right location. I think there's definitely, it's smart design. So I don't think it's now a question of fairness, I think it's now a question of we need to change the system so that these things, like in terms of orientation, which don't cost money, these things in regards to where windows are placed need to happen very early on in the piece. And architects and building designers need to get on board and be able to design and understand the concepts, because they don't, and to design these buildings very early on at the planning stage, so you don't have to make the changes down at the, when you lodge to us with building rules.
That's true.
And in South Australia and Tasmania, I don't know too much about the other states. There are concessions in South Australia, and the concessions make sense because sometimes it's very difficult to actually comply. So for example, if you've got an existing dwelling and you're going to be adding to it, it's sometimes impossible. Well, you shouldn't have to look at, because it looks at a floor area. Okay, so just this addition, that floor area, you'd have to make that comply. But what you would end up doing is overcompensating, because it's such a small box and you're not looking at this area here, the other parts of the dwelling. To get this to comply, if you're doing it as a star rating as an example, it would probably be around 7 or 8. So what the concessions allow is that you look at the dwelling as a whole.
As a whole,
Yeah, and that means that this does not need to compensate for what the poor performing areas. So that's a good thing. So there's, I think, some there's some positives about the state changes. I'm not sure what Tasmania are doing, but I know Northern Territory are way behind everybody else in regards to energy efficiency, and for various reasons, which might be valid as well. I don't know.
And which aspect of NCC energy efficiency provision is most important, and why?
Siting the building correctly. So that's outside of our scope. This is what's silly about the energy efficiency provisions, I think. So we do energy assessments as well here. What we find is that you lodge someone engages a building designer or an architect at this point. The building designer asks, what would you like? And they develop this design. Then what they'll do is they'll lodge to council for planning with no thought about energy efficiency. Once they've lodged with council for planning, it then gets sent to us. Now, if we change the design, it's going to cost them probably another month of wasted time.
True.
So by the time that we receive the application, it's set. They don't want to change the window locations. They don't want to change where the dwelling is sited because you have to start this
Go back
process
to
again.
Cancel, yeah.
Because of that, it's silly. The system's currently silly because we're requesting the information at this point when they should be considering it here. If they do, there's no... Once we receive the applications, you pretty much guarantee that it has been sited correctly and that the windows are in the prime location.
True.
So that when we have to assess it, it's always going to pass. Simple changes that you can make at this stage can save thousands in the long run, and they're very simple to do. So that's where it should be outside of. So siting is the most important thing, and also having it somehow integrated with the lodgement for planning rather than building.
Okay.
Do you think the greenhouse gas emission case by the building have declined since the NCC energy efficiency provisions were introduced in Australia?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Simply the star rating is the best thing that you can do to determine megawatt usage of energy throughout a year. Every time you move up to the next level, you're reducing the amount of energy usage. If you're reducing the amount of energy usage, you're also reducing the amount of greenhouse gas emissions there are.
Yeah.
So definitely, as we continue to move forwards, the knock-on effect is that the greenhouse gas emissions will also reduce. So they are tied up. It is part of the performance. I think the performance requirement does mention reduction in greenhouse emissions.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps it's changed. Maybe it was a change in 2019. I can't recall exactly, but that's the intention. That's the reason for the whole section.
Okay. All right. I'll take you through fire resistance code. After the 2014 Lacrosse fire in Melbourne and the 2017 Grenfell fire in London, the ABCB changed Volume 2016 Volume 1 to include Clause C1.9 that requires non-combustible cladding for Type A or Type B constructions. And the Victoria Civil and Administrative Tribunal found the building certifier partly responsible for the fire. Do you think that has changed the way private certifiers and building surveyors would make assessments?
All right, so I'm just going to go back to the beginning part of the question.
Yeah.
So it's talking about the Lacrosse fire, that's fine, Grenfell. Okay, the Australian Building Code Board changed the NCC 2016 Volume 1 in 2018. The change, Clause C1.9, require that buildings of type A or B construction must be constructed with non-combustible cladding. It always did need to be constructed with non-combustible cladding.
Okay.
There was never, and this is the truth behind the situation,
All right.
is that there was never, it was never permitted to allow an external wall to be constructed with combustible cladding in any element of the wall.
Okay.
All this clause did is it clarified that it applied to every single component of the external wall. But that was always the intention.
Right. So it's just every single component in that.
This whole problem has occurred because of how something has been interpreted. And the interpretation was incorrect, but the intention was always to be that no combustibles could be used as part of the external walls.
Oh, wow. All right. So the question was, do you think that would change the way private certifiers and building surveyors make assessments, since the building certifier involved in the Lacrosse fire was found partly responsible for it?
Yeah, that's had a huge impact on our industry.
Okay.
The main reason is because certifiers always believed that they were not involved in the design, that they were undertaking a statutory function, and because of that, they would not be as culpable as what other parties would be, other design parties, because whoever designs generally takes on most of the risk.
Yeah.
So if you're an architect, if you're a design engineer or services engineer, you are primarily taking on a lot of risk, and you have your insurances for that risk. Certifiers looked at it as, well, we're approving what they're doing, but we're not designing. Because of that, there was a misunderstanding about the risk that we had, and that's now come out because of what's happened with VCAT, the ruling.
Yeah.
The reason why is because what certifiers actually started to do in the last 10, 15 years is sign contracts, which is not something that you would do if you're a statutory function. So you don't go to council,
Okay.
and you don't say to council, can you sign this when they want to develop something, can you sign this contract form? And the council will just laugh at them and say, we are council, we don't sign your contracts.
Yeah.
By rights, the same thing as what certifiers should have been saying. We undertake a statutory function. We're not a consultant.
All
we
right.
cannot sign consultant agreements.
Yeah.
But it happens. When you sign a consultancy agreement, you now are arguably part of the team, arguably part of a design team.
Oh wow.
And because of that reason, the insurers are now not considering you as a statutory authority, but now you hold a lot of risk because now you're part of that team.
Yeah.
Because now you're considered as part of the design as well, even though you do have to remain independent.
Yeah.
So that's what's happened, I think, as a result of it, is that certifiers now, the amount of risk that we thought we didn't have is actually now evident that we actually do carry a lot of risk with what we do.
Okay.
And as a result, we need to be a lot more careful when we're assessing applications and making sure that we're doing the right thing.
All right.
It's actually a really good thing.
And the premium, has that gone higher? The premium, I believe, you pay to insurance.
Yes. So during that time, the insurers were thinking, okay, there's a group of these certifiers, they're undertaking a statutory function, therefore it's not a high risk. Now, because of this ruling, they've looked at it and they've said, well, hang on a sec, there actually is a lot of risk in this market.
Yeah.
So they're either pulling out,
Okay.
a lot of them are, or they're just increasing the premiums
All right.
by a significant amount.
Okay.
And particularly the ones who have approved combustible cladding for whatever reason, because now with insurers it's not about cladding anymore.
Okay.
That's what they're telling us.
Yeah.
We don't have any cover anymore for cladding.
Okay.
No insurers providing it.
Yeah. And just a side question. With the new verification system for performance solution, would a combustible cladding like ACP still pass as a cladding system, or? No?
From what I understand, I think the test is 5113, I think it's called.
Yeah.
From the verification method,
Yeah.
and that test, it's based on a British test, with a variation in the Australian standard is that it needs to pass a debris test.
Okay.
So what that means is that you need to put it up 6 meters, I think it is, or whatever it might be. You burn it, and you see if there's any parts of the cladding that is going to delaminate and fall.
Okay.
There's not one that passes.
All right.
And that's why ACP cannot be used.
Okay.
It's because we do have the different ways. You do have to try to comply with C1.9. You
Yeah.
can't because it's combustible.
Okay.
But then you do have this other mechanism, which is AS5113
Yeah.
through the verification method. But you can't use that because it's going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're finding now is a move more towards just aluminium panels,
Okay.
not a composite material.
Okay.
So just straight aluminium, because it's the bits in between, which is what burns.
All right. Okay. And has there been a significant change? Oh, yeah, you said that. Has there been a significant change in cladding system with the introduction of this change? Or will there be a significant change?
Yeah, that has. Because manufacturers want to sell their products, so they're getting their products tested,
Okay.
and they're failing, and there's no real means of, if they can't sell the product, then there's a whole market they can't sell to. So I'm not sure what the next step is going to be.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're proposing to do to get through the system.
Okay.
Not to say that there's anything unlawful,
Yeah.
but what they're going to maybe change the way they fix, or change, the fixer panels.
All right.
A significant change. I'm finding a lot more use of the aluminium panels,
Okay.
or just ones that meet the requirements from AS 1530.1,
Yeah.
which are deemed as non-combustible.
Okay.
It's not to say that that's going to solve anything, because those panels are also potentially a hazard. And what I'm finding that there were a few concessions for not having to use a non-combustible product for your external wall.
Yeah.
the Australian Building Codes Board have reneged, I think, or reworded those clauses so that you can't use those concessions anymore. So almost just, said, whoops, we had concession clauses in here, but we have to get rid of those.
Okay.
And they're also suggesting that the way that those were supposed to be interpreted were done incorrectly as well,
Right. Okay.
which is extremely odd.
Yeah.
And leaves a lot of people in a high level of risk because it's clearly not supposed to be interpreted the way they're saying it was. It's clearly meant to be interpreted that it was permitted, yet they're washing their hands of it now and saying, no, you're wrong.
Okay.
So until that gets caught up in something like VCAT or something, then it needs to get challenged. And if it does get challenged, I think Australian Building Codes Board are in trouble.
Is that why they introduced in the guides to help with the interpretations and things like that?
That's right. They introduced a few guides into how it's supposed to be interpreted.
Yeah.
But they're writing this guide to suit the outcome that they want, and that's to have no responsibility.
Okay. Fire protected timber was adopted in 2016. This allows multi-story buildings up to 25 meters in effective height to be constructed using fire protected timber. What has been the reception, or what do you think will be the reception of this provision by the construction industry?
Well, it doesn't make a lot of sense, does it?
Really?
Well, how on one hand can you say that you cannot use non-combustible materials, and on the other hand, extend the requirements to allow fire protective timber to be used? Now, fire protective timber is fire check, or fire rated plasterboard, timber, which is combustible, fire rated plasterboard.
All right.
Aluminium cladding is aluminium, combustible material, and aluminium. So when you think about it, there's actually not much difference between these two systems, except the Timber Development Association are a very strong lobby group and have perhaps pushed this. Now, I shouldn't really be comparing the two scenarios because timber, although it is combustible, when it is quite thick, it does have a good charring rate, and it is going to remain structurally sound for a bit of time. So I can't really compare that to aluminium composite panels because those panels have basically petroleum in between them. So it's not quite the same, but it just goes to show that the timber, although combustible, is still being accepted by the Australian Building Codes Board, whereas it's a little bit at odds with where everything else is going in, with regard to not allowing a combustible material in the external wall.
Okay. All right. And this is the final part for one of our colleagues. NCC 2019 removed the requirement for fire hydrant booster protection for sprinkler protected building and added alternative protection for fire hydrant boosters located between 3.5 meters and 10 meters from the building they protect. In your opinion, why did the ABCB make these changes?
I think what's happened here is anything to do with firefighting. Certifiers don't generally make a call on it because I don't go out to fight the fire. The fire brigade does. So anything in regards to hydrants or boosters or anything in regards to putting out a fire, you would just say, I'm not making a call. We go to the fire service and we'll sit down with them and see if they find it acceptable in regards to how they operate. So what their operational requirements are first. Now, I think what's happened here is that Australia-wide, when it did go to the fire service, they were permitting this concession throughout. So they were happy with the reduction in the location of where the hydrant booster was. Because of that, because it was happening nationally, they probably thought, well, instead of going to the fire service for an alternative solution, which takes time and cost, let's just introduce it into the building code. So that's why I think that's happened. So I don't think there's anything untoward there. I think it's actually a good thing and it's going to save time.
For Class 2 and 3 buildings, the NCC 2019 requires buildings in these classes over 4 stories and under 25 meters in effective height to have a sprinkler protection system. In your opinion, was there a need for this provision, and will this provide more protection?
Okay, was there a need? All right, so this ties in nicely to the question previously. It's making a bit more sense to me now about access and egress. All right, so what you could have previously is a building that was 24 metres in height from ground to the floor of the most top floor.
Yeah.
So 24 metres, a single stair that serves all the apartments. And yes, the stair does need to be located within 6 metres to all the apartment doors. That's fine.
Yeah.
But we don't need sprinklers in this building. Now, if someone is living there and there's a fire here at the ground level, adjacent to where that stair is, I think we have a serious problem. And that was a problem that's what was identified. Where you do have I think there's a fear. One of the biggest fatalities in buildings is in residence, not apartments, not commercial buildings. It's dwellings because of smoke alarms. And what you'll find is there might be one death, I don't know, a week. I don't know what the statistics are, but they're pretty high.
Okay.
But it's random, and it's not a huge. It's not 15 people or 20 people.
Yeah.
It might be 2 or 3. The problem is if you have a fire event in a building, like an apartment, there's going to be a lot of fatalities potentially. So that's why the introduction of these things are pushed more in apartment buildings rather than residential.
Okay.
But having said that, I still think that this is fantastic because under 25 metres you don't need sprinklers. That's why I mentioned 24 metres.
Yeah.
So you don't need sprinklers.
Yeah.
So you could have a raging fire, and yes, people can get out of the building, but if you're on a single stair, you're in trouble.
That's true.
So what they've looked at also is different types of sprinkler systems.
Yeah.
So there's the FPAA systems that are used, and they're inexpensive.
Okay.
So it's not the full 2118 systems that you normally would have. But speaking to some consultants, what they're saying is the FPAA systems don't work anyway. So so you're basically looking at a full commercial sprinkler system in these buildings.
Okay.
And I think, again, it's a good thing. You've got large numbers of people sleeping in these spaces. The cost of these apartments are going up. You know, some of them cost upwards of $1 million. So if you're spending that much money on an apartment, you want to know that it's safe.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. All right, and then final question: what do you think is the future of the codes, the NCC in general? Like, where do you think they're heading and all that? Do you think it will get tighter? Or?
It's a good question. It's hard to know where things are going because you get mixed messages. So this is all from the Australian Building Codes Board, who, when they come out to you, they say that we want to, and this could be, I think, from the Liberal government that's come in, they want to promote alternative solutions.
Okay.
So that alternative solutions is not when you're meeting the deemed to satisfy, but you're providing some other means of meeting the performance requirement.
Yeah.
So to do that, that's when you bring in, you know, we talked before about computer modelling.
Okay.
So all those types of things into buildings, and it's good. I think alternative solutions are necessary for innovation and a few other things up to a certain point. So they promote this as something, and they've actually introduced about 20 more verification methods now into the building code.
Yeah.
So verification method is not a deemed to satisfy solution.
Yeah.
So it's a way of achieving a performance requirement.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're promoting verification methods, the fact that they're promoting, or they're introducing a lot more, they're promoting alternative solutions, to me, it means that they're pushing a little bit, you know, to show that deemed to satisfy is not the only method for compliance.
Yeah.
There's all these other methods that we can use to maintain, provided you do it correctly, that can maintain a safe, accessible, healthy environment, but to save money in construction costs as well.
Okay. All right. And you think that's a good thing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think it's a good thing because you know, especially because we're involved in it, but we see projects not go ahead because of compliance. There might be a compliance reason why something might not proceed.
Okay.
We want to see things happen. We want to see development happen.
Yeah.
But it still needs to be a balance between providing safe buildings, meeting codes, meeting standards, but also allowing buildings to be occupied as well, because unoccupied buildings are a safety risk anyway.
That's true.
So yeah, I support the fact that they're moving towards the verification methods. The way a lot of them don't make a lot of sense, to be honest. So they probably should discuss it a bit more with the industry first.
Okay.
But yeah, it's only going to be a good thing. Deemed to satisfy is too rigid, and we should be promoting different materials and different types of things, different ways, methods for construction, but in a way where we're not putting lives at risk, like what happened with cladding.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for your time and agreeing to do this with us.
No problem.